Good afternoon. So it's been yet another almost a month, I think, since I last streamed. And I'm going away for a few days tomorrow, so I thought I should do something before I left. Again, like we have talked about previously, like we're getting just weeks, typical retracement. Weeks of sideways. Drop, weeks of sideways drop, etc. So it's been going on for a while. So it's only if you manage to time these drops effectively that you're actually getting good, decent trades at the moment. Bitcoin, obviously, is what I'm talking about. So the high time frames just take their time to play out. We've got to get some accumulation, etc., which may or may not be happening here. And the lower time frames, you're just getting the chop until you get these sort of interim moves. Which generally we hope would come a little bit quicker, but they're very variable. But just got to put up with what we get at the moment, I guess. So at the moment, Bitcoin, I thought I'd just do this quick update on just crypto. I will cover Bitcoin, Ether, the majors, and then maybe some alts quickly, but I do want to try and stick this to 45 minutes, so I don't know whether that's going to happen. But I won't repeat what I've said in previous streams, I think, because you can go back and watch those, frankly. And I don't really need to do all the full updates. Maybe when I come back from going away, I can do a bit more of that. What I said in the last stream is that what we really wanted to do was check all the 6-month zones, and that's what I've been doing. So on alts, I've been going through, and I was doing it a bit haphazardly, just as alerts were coming in, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to be forever if I do it too haphazardly. So I then went back and just started with ABC, as I have done previously, and I'm up to H at the moment. And it's interesting because you get so biased. Like, I get biased by the alerts that are coming in. But the alerts that are coming in are obviously, not obviously, but are the ones that are doing things that are a bit different to everything else. So the ones that are having random pumps and then being pumped further by pump groups, or the ones that are having stronger up moves, at least to get back into supply, so my alerts go, and or hitting major demands. Like for some of the ones that have a lot of history, they are hitting major demands, or they're breaking and going to zero, which I'll show in a little while. But so I got quite biased, I think, to thinking things were kind of moving. And then when I started doing ABCD, etc., I was going through the G's the other day and just thinking, like, literally every chart was looking the same as I was going through. It was everything had 2-month supply. Some of them have 6-month and various things higher. They've all rejected off yearly supplies, 6-month, 3-month supplies at the highs or at previous highs. Now they make new 2-3-month supplies that reject those. Then we've all made new 2-month supplies now. So I found that I was just like looking at all these charts in perpetual downtrends. But I kind of had forgotten that really was the state of the market. And it's just been biased to, looking at things like Zcash or Hype, those things that happen to be outperforming for one reason or another. Anyway, so back to Bitcoin. So as you know, we're in 2-month demand. This didn't make a 6-month supply, but it did make a 2-month supply, which is why it's hit just there at that high. It looks like 2 crosses. This was the level I was looking at. It's not ideal. Like, I don't like the way this has come down here. These levels aren't necessarily that good when there's nothing going on and there's a big imbalance running through the actual level itself. Plus, it's a 2-month, and I think 2-month isn't necessarily the most reliable. I think not everybody's looking at 2-month charts. People are looking at 1, 3, and 6, but not necessarily 2. However, we have had a reaction, well, actually just below that level. It did hit here, but this was before the 2-month confirmed. So in fact, what I was preferably looking for was to take out that high as a stop hunt and then drop and not go all the way up into here. Or if it does go all the way up into here, I think there's a fair chance we'll break this and become a little bit more bullish. On the bull side, we are in 2-month demand. We're also in a bigger 3-month that starts from up there. I've just deleted some of the colors off this. So we're just between rock and hard place at the moment. We're in a major demand, but it needs some time. It's already had a bounce there and come up, and now it's bounced lower in the demand, but it needs some time to figure out if it's going to reverse here, having had a downtrend for the better part of a year. October 2025, so not quite a year. So it'll be a year in October. And in fact, that year is when we expect the bottom to be at the end of in October this year, if previous trends follow on the timelines. So potentially we can still mess around in here, like, and there's many options. You know, maybe this 3 month will play out, and we get a bounce up into this supply, and then we come back down and test here. For if the October timeline is to hold, and then we hold again here, maybe with a bigger broadening wedge or something, and then go up. That's a possibility. Equally possible, we just mess around in here, we reject off this 2 month level or can't get back past there, and come deeper and drift around here for another few months until October. Or alternatively get down back into, so this is annual demand is where we would look. So typically annual demand gets front run, so I'm not necessarily banking on it going there, but again, from my previous high time frame analysis, if you've watched that, like we've got this annual demand, we normally have 80% drops. And that would take us, I think it was to like 35k, but yeah, you can check that yourself. Yeah, so there's just many factors we need to consider at the moment. And at the moment, and since I did the last stream, which I think was around here, it's just been messy. And quite hard to judge. So like each time, like I have to constantly do 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5 day, and new supply and demands appear on each close. So as of yesterday, we are, I think, still in a 4 day demand, but we closed back below, so potentially flip that to supply. So I currently have that drawn as a supply. However, we're still holding a 3 day demand, we're still holding higher lows, and we're still holding this little uptrend, mini uptrend on the lower time frame. So it's just a little bit challenging. I wanted to get a test down into here. And that's 2 day demand down there. And then, as you know, so I had this box as the potential failed wave zone, and we just sort of front run that. So, and that's another possibility if we do come back down and take out the low. So those are the immediate longs if they are given. And then the more negative bearish longs down on yearly or below. And on the short side, that 2 month, like I say, we've just hit. This I just think too, you know, I could alert here, I could alert here, I could alert here. There's just too much going on up there. So I would just haven't alerted much there at the moment. Maybe in this weekly would be another sort of interim zone to watch if we get a better bounce. And then various zones back up the top that haven't been tested. So here we got the rejection of 3 month supply. So that was a nice entry. And again, still had the imbalance similar to what we've got here now, but got an immediate rejection, came down, took out the low. So essentially that 3 month has played out. But yeah, so I just need to wait and see a little bit more on this. If you're trading on the long side, we are in a zone that's perfectly tradable on the high time frames. And if you're trading on the short side, like I say, we front run that very, very slightly at the high there. And also I should comment, BitMEX, which I've charted on for years, is now finally shutting down. So I'm going to need to finally switch exchanges, which means redrawing everything, which is kind of annoying, but also necessary because BitMEX, I think Bitcoin's still okay on BitMEX, but the Ether chart, which I can show in a minute, has got difficult. Like it's very, very low volume, so the gaps on it and all sorts of annoying things. And I don't know. And also I've seen Ether wick a couple of times when the rest of the market hasn't. So I'm not sure, you know, like if I looked at other exchanges, if I looked at Binance, would I see this level has been tapped on Binance? Did it take out that high and it just didn't on BitMEX? I'm not sure. Haven't checked those things in detail. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, on the long side, if you think this is the bottom, if you want to trade this as it's taken out that low and it's trying to bounce, then look for longs on this 2 day demand in here, and you may get a scalp even if you're not getting the bigger thing. Be conscious that we are in 2 months supply, even though, like I say, I don't like it much, and it's weak because it's only just taken out the low by a small amount here. It hasn't had a significant drop off this level. Like this one had a significant drop and a significant decent retest. This is still sort of messing around. But yeah, I mean, like I'm not a massive fan of trading Bitcoin at the moment. It's my lower time frame chart. It just hasn't been, and to be fair, I haven't been focusing on it like I should have, or like I used to, should I say, not like I should have done, because I've been focusing a lot on alts. But yeah, I haven't had, as you can see, we had the lower time frame entries there for longs. Then I was looking for shorts coming back into this zone, as you expect. And it gave a little consolidation sideways before moving up. I did get a long entry on that second test down there. And then it's just been a bit awkward because it's hard to know at this point, you know, if you're longing here, you're longing, in my opinion, at resistance. We are locally, we're at the top of a move down, and in the higher time frame, we're in this two monthly supply, and this last clean supply from the drop. So I haven't wanted to long since this one. I was kind of watching, and there were a few things, and then, as I said before, it was difficult because there was 2-day demand, 3-day demand, 4-day demand, and the various things, and it's hard to know how much it's going to drop into it. And as you can see, you know, these have dropped very deep. Each of these pullbacks have been very deep until that last one when it was shallower, and then it's reversed anyway. So now on the lower time frame, so we've got this new 4-day supply that I talked about up at 64,700-ish, 600. And I did have an alert here there's a 4-hour supply in there, so you can look for a short around this area potentially, but again, noting we are still on the higher lows. So even though we've had a bit of a decent drop over the last couple of days, and a bit of a decent drop since 21st, so the last week, we are still on a higher low, just clinging on to by the skin of its teeth. But yeah, so here I initially had a re-entry for 4-hour here, and then at the weekend, weekends have been annoying as well, and weekends tend to be when I have a chance to look at the charts, which is, or look more at Bitcoin recently. And the weekends have been annoying because, again, the low volume means you're getting a lot more volatility and a lot more messing around. So I had this alert here for 4-hour supply up there that I was hoping to come up and test, but then I looked at where Ether was. And Ether, I'll get to, but went through the lower high zones, obviously, and took out the high again to yesterday. But I thought, okay, this might reject. There's a 2-hour supply in here, so I did an alert for 2-hour supply there, and it went right up to the top of it, but didn't quite take out the high. And this is also of interest. You know, it's left some equal highs here, and then more stops there from Monday. And Bitcoin can do this. So like when the expectation, like a lot of people trade swing failures on Bitcoin exclusively. What it can do when it does want to drop is not take out highs. So that turned out to be a pretty good entry, and it didn't take out the high, didn't get to that entry, and then had a significant drop. Whether that's a prelude to a bigger drop, I'm not sure. But yeah, just be conscious of that Bitcoin can do that when it's ready to really do a decent drop. It can just leave stops behind because everybody's waiting to short up here, and it doesn't let them in, and it just drops. I mean, maybe it's this, you know, we have had a flip of 4-hour here, so we can see. And we've got FOMC tonight, so we need to see what if any, reaction that has. A lot of what's been happening on this, the other comment I should probably make on this is that the Korea pair, so a lot of what's been happening on Bitcoin, while people are calling Bitcoin bullish, God knows based on what, but because it's just gone up for a week or two, a lot of what this has been a reaction to what the dollar's doing. And the reason I know that, and I say that more specifically, is because you can see what Korea is doing. It means when Korea starts looking, the Bitcoin Korea pair starts looking more bearish or more bullish than the US dollar pair, and the structures are different, it tends to mean that the dollar's doing something that's pushing this around, rather than crypto actually having its own supply and demand dynamics going on, or there's more to it than just its independent supply and demand dynamics. There's also stuff going on with the dollar. So you can see here the Korea pair much lower high than the high on the 16th of June. It also just tapped the 2-month, and it's come straight down off it. On top of that, like this closed last week with a weekly supply. So now the US dollar pair has closed with a 4-day supply, but didn't close with a weekly supply. Did close more strongly, and only by a tiny amount, but did close with a weekly supply and just rejected straight off that and dropped lower. What is of interest on this? I'm just going to show you something that I was thinking about earlier. Just hide the bottom charts for a moment. And this is a potentially bullish observation, or intermediate term bullish anyway. You may or may not recall back here. So when we made this low down here in December 2022, you have to have a good memory for that, like me. But what I did observe back then was that Korea hadn't hit demand properly at this point. or when we were consolidating here. So while we were saying, I think that this was the bottom that we wanted from Bitcoin, from the US dollar pair, Korea hadn't hit it yet. So I kept saying, again, we need to wait until Korea hits. And Korea exactly hit zone, I think it was a 3-day zone down there, no, a weekly zone here. And then the market moved together. See, this had hit a 5-day or a 4-day zone before, and then this hit the weekly after. And so I found it interesting, and looking at where we are now, that we're in 2-month demand on the US dollar pair. We came into 2-month demand on the Korean pair with a wick. And again, it's made a higher low here, whereas US dollar pair has made a lower low. So you can see those differences anyway. And this maybe just be a bit of a rogue wick because it came very deep there on Korea before the bounce. And also kind of just slightly front run the 3-day supply up there as well. But I was thinking that maybe there was a chance that this would continue to make higher lows or stay in this range while we get the Korea pair dropping again to kind of match where the US dollar pair is. So i.e. be deeper inside this 2-month zone. So if we look in comparison, got this 2-month zone, we've got a weekly inside it. This obviously didn't have the weekly, or I've deleted it. No, it just didn't, it's a bit of a different structure. But maybe we do have the wick down there already to that same level, so maybe that's enough. But maybe also we can see Korea come down, make lower lows, this hold the 2-day demand for a higher low, and then start to see it move. So that's just something to watch out for anyway. Just an observation I made earlier, may or may not be correct, but based on what happened in that December 2022 low, it is possible that we see that divergence because of the difference and because of the dollar driving some of this price movement. Now the dollar's interesting in itself. I can actually get to the chart. The dollar's been causing me endless pain this year, and I really need to do an update on my FX. I haven't done one for 6 months of the FX results and haven't really been trading them much myself, but yeah, I still have the alerts coming through and I still chart them because I like to know what's going on. Back when's this? June 2025, so now a year ago, we hit annual demand on the dollar. And then in that year, we've barely gone anywhere. It bounced a little bit, came down, took out the low, bounced again. In the meantime, then, because we closed down here at the end of the year, we then created annual supply. So each of these bounces, I was then hoping was going to hit annual or 6 months. I think it's a 6 month or 3 months. I've got a 2 month drawn in there, but maybe that's a 3 month as well. I know it was a 3 month a little bit lower here. But yeah, for a long time, I was just really wanting these zones to hit. Go back down to the lower time frame. With that. Each of these bounces, I was really kind of going, right, I want to push up into here, right, I want to push up into here, and it's just for a year, it's just been causing me grief. And it's been making the FX pairs significantly harder to trade. It's now made a monthly demand, but again, so now it's just difficult, and I've talked about this, I think, in previous streams as well, that it's a huge annual zone, so we could get a reaction like right now where we are, or we could go higher inside to some of these untested zones that we've got above. And I would really, if that's going to happen, I would like to get a test down into this monthly first before we get that move. Whether it's going to offer me now because it's just painful, I don't know. It's still messing around in here, so I think that was the first alert I had for 3 month supply, and then I had an alert for annual supply just for, obviously we don't trade this, but for observational purposes. And it's sort of trying to push from here. So we need to see what happens. And not dissimilar to Bitcoin, it's a rock and a hard place. So Bitcoin's 2 months at the low and 2 months at the high. This is 1 year at the low and 1 year at the high. And then you're just running range in between those two zones until it starts to look like it's going to break higher in the zone or take out the lows. So I think this is, so this is a bit of the problem of what's happened with Korea, at least over the last, so since June, but probably maybe also a bit longer. I just haven't observed it quite as much. But because the dollar's been getting stronger, the BTC actually doesn't make sense, does it? If the dollar's getting stronger, then we want the BTC US dollar pair to get weaker relative to the BTC Korea pair, I think. Sometimes it takes me a moment to get my head around these things. But yeah, normally maybe it's just lower time frames that I'm looking at then, and maybe there's some impact of what the Korean dollar is doing. I think I did look at that, and the Korean dollar, the Korean won was dropping, I think, quite a lot when I looked at it on that particular day. Anyway, what it's done since then, I don't know. But anyway, this is the challenge. So if the dollar starts weakening off here, which is, it's going to make, if it makes a double top and starts weakening into annual supply here, that could be very good for crypto. The difficulty we have is we need to see people start to buy. So let me just go to the ETF data for a little bit. So BlackRock was doing a small amount of buying, and a few people were doing a small amount of buying for the last couple of weeks, middle of July. But then, yeah, end of last week, we had some heavy selling for some reason. So yeah, we're just not seeing. But then historically as well, again, I don't think this is the best indicator for where a bottom's going to be until later, unfortunately, because one thing I observed, and I compared these a while ago, is that when the buying was happening, unfortunately, I've completely deleted it. It's going to take me too long to find it in my notes. But I believe when I look back at this, that we had, for example, a lot of the buying of ETFs in here, which I think is why I looked for longs on this, because historically the ETF levels held. But I believe there we had a lot of buying, and possibly here. So it's not generally at the bottoms, or maybe it was in there, I'm not sure, but it's not generally at the bottoms that we see all the ETF buying coming in. We see it when it's at resistance. Well, that's what we did on this up move anyway. I think there were 2 or 3 different times through here, maybe even coming from lower. When did the ETFs start? Actually, I think the ETFs only opened here. I think this was potentially where the ETFs opened. Was it? I think it was January, February 24, or 25. No, 25 would be too high up. Must be down here somewhere. But yeah, the ETF buying only tends to happen after the move has started and it's at resistance. So that's kind of what I wanted to look for. I think I did comment on that somewhere over here, like if we were going to get a higher low here, perhaps, that I wanted to see the ETF buying coming in as we came up into this area, although I don't think we ever got that high. So yeah, that's the ETF buying is not necessarily the best indicator, but always worth keeping an eye on, because if they do suddenly start buying, then we want to know about it. I think that's it for now on Bitcoin. Let me just redo these charts. Obviously, the reciprocal chart, US dollar dominance, has the same and hasn't quite touched as well. So I can see, given what we have on Bitcoin and on this chart, I could see potentially Bitcoin do another push and this do another drop and come back down. Whether it taps into that 2-month level there or whether it comes deeper inside it, I don't know. But this is obviously a very critical level as well. It's near its previous all-time high. It's got, if we're looking at stop hunts on dominance chart, I'm not sure it could take out this high. It's coming off 6-month demand here. So we go back to USDC, which is slightly less strong, but just so I had these lines on it, so I drew these green, red and black lines back in, I think around here, in around June. I was saying so that we were coming down into this zone, so I said we would either, we're coming into a 6-month, 3-month demand zones, and I was saying actually the green one is the highest probability, the higher probability. Most people don't want to hear that or see that. The green one was the highest probability. The black one is a probable path as well, if we were going to make a lower high and then come back down into here. So that's very bullish for Bitcoin and the crypto market. And the red one would be, if Bitcoin had gone out and taken out all-time high and this demand had broken. But what happened is we got the bounce earlier, we came back down, we tested here, and obviously we've just taken off from there. So the US dollar tether dominance is coming up to potentially break the high. US dollar USDC dominance still has some space to get to this supply as well, and has come into 2-month demand here. So again, there are signs here that we see on this, and let's go back to the US dollar dominance chart. There are signs of this strength diminishing, for sure. We have decent up move consolidation, less decent up move. It hasn't really taken out the high significantly. Is it major resistance up here? So there are signs that this is softening, but we still need to see a sign of breakdown to actually think it's reversed, and then the equivalent on Bitcoin. So that's why I say it's nothing wrong with looking for longs on Bitcoin right now. There are things that support the possibility of early longs here, but know that they're early, that this is still very much in an uptrend and still could keep going indefinitely up. What we would want to see here for shorts is really, well, that low broken. So we're looking for that to come down into there, retest, and then we're looking for the downtrend to commence, and then have that double top come in, very similar to the Ether chart, in fact, if you look at the Ether macro chart. But until we start to see some support breaking, we can see, you can start being aggressive. There is a weekly supply in here. Oops. The weekly supply in here, so if you'd wanted to short that, you could short that, i.e. long Bitcoin. That's entirely up to you. Those are early shorts, but again, no, what you're doing is that we're still in this uptrend for now. The other thing I had with looking at buying that 2-day demand on Bitcoin, the one that's still a higher low, but hasn't been tested yet, it was similar here, that we had these trend line stops that were developing through here. I wanted this really to come down and hit the 2-month, but don't get everything you want. And maybe if I looked at the 12-hour chart, it has. Who knows? No, it hasn't. Sometimes the wicks are a bit different depending on the time frame. But yeah, potentially get this up to test into that supply, and Bitcoin tests the 2-day demand, and maybe we get some sort of a move there, which does have a bigger move. But all of this is very hypothetical at this point. There are things that don't align. There are things, the supply is still in control at the moment. We've hit demand, but we need to see demand actually be demand. So supply remains in control for Bitcoin. And obviously the structure is still in a downtrend for now. On the medium time frames, and the higher time frames, it could retain the uptrend. And what else was I going to say? I had another point, but I can't remember what it was now. That'll do anyway. Where are we on time? 30 minutes on Bitcoin. How do I do that? How do I end up talking so much when I intend on not talking so much? So let's quickly have a look at Ether. Ether historically has been easier, but has actually been a lot harder recently. Again, I've been trying to do that more on the lower time frame, which I'll look at in a minute, but it's been kind of more painful, but also because it's done this little uptrend. So where I've been looking at lower highs, and I can reflect on this, or self-assess that, again, I was looking initially on the lower time frames, I was looking for shorts in here. Again, that's fine. It's lower probability because it didn't take out the low. So once it's made a higher low, then if you're trying to short for a lower high, you're looking for a triangle, but it's weak supply. So it doesn't surprise me it went through there. I think on the lower time frames it did do some bit of a messing around, but on this daily chart you can barely even see it sort of stopping here. Then it tried, maybe it was here, I was trying to look for those lower highs, and it had a weekly supply, but obviously it's now gone through and flipped that weekly to demand. What I do can reflect on is I think I was on each of these hits. Why does that keep doing that? Pressing the triangle. I'm just getting a Telegram message. Let me just check what that says in case I'm... No, it's just a question about Ether. How would I trade the trade if I shorted from 4-hour supply? I will answer that question in a minute. Yeah, to do with a local entry I just had on Ether. So again, what I did here, and I shouldn't have done, was look for short. So once I didn't have alerts for these highs, I only had the alert on the 2-month. But in case I was front run, I was looking at short re-entries on here and on here. And I think this one gave a decent enough reaction for a scalp, but obviously ultimately it's kept going up, and it's still kept the same higher lows in that same little channel that Bitcoin has. So, and with hindsight, I should have just waited until the 2-month supply was hit, because that's my system does say that. Like, it says wait until the zone is hit. If you miss the zone, then you miss there. If it does front run the zone, which typically doesn't happen, but if it does, then you miss the trade. No big deal. But rather than have this happen and get stopped out 3 times before potentially it does make the move. So now similarly on Ether to Bitcoin, it's You can see it's got the 3-day demand, it's tested inside it, it's made another 3-day demand, it's tested inside it, and again, it's got this chop. So what I actually wanted to do, one of the things I was hoping we would get yesterday, I did draw a little line, let me see if I've still got it. Yeah, as I was kind of saying that what I was hoping, it's again similar to Bitcoin, we've hit 2 months supply, but I don't love it. It's got this big chop and gap through here, so I still think it could go higher inside if it wants. It's come down, we did have the long on the low here, it was a 5-day weekly demand, so I've deleted the 5-day now because it came down into the weekly. And it, in fact, came to 1500 there, quite deep in that side, that weekly on the wicks. Made a higher low and went up again, so we did get the long entry on that on the higher time frame, and now this is the potential short entry, the first possible short entry on the higher time frame. Similar to Bitcoin, I had a re-entry alert on this daily demand, which was, I think, around similar to the 2-day demand on Bitcoin. Didn't come back for me, made a weekly demand and just took off straight from there. It is what it is. But yeah, what I was saying is that I would like to see a decent reaction off this 2 month, but if we were still going to hold for another up move, I would like to see these stops taken out and to come into this 2-day demand that hasn't been tested yet. Just down there, tap onto the top of there and then get the move up. So we can still see if that is going to happen or not. When I look at the lower time frames, again, I don't love it because I just don't love any of this structure really. And these sort of 3 hits to the high coming into a 2-month supply, maybe we're going to get a significant drop off that. So I did put an aggressive short in again, which apparently I think has actually had a reaction to start with now, but we just need to see if we get any follow-up. As you know, on Ether, so again, one thing I alluded to on my last video, and I copied and pasted, this is Litecoin up here. It's Litecoin shifted by a bull run because this is 2018 on Litecoin, whereas it's 2021 on Ether. But it just struck me that a lot of this structure looks quite similar to what Litecoin was doing and ended up doing, just taking out the high and has just been sideways ever since. So I was speculating and just putting that there to remind myself that wondering if we just get something like this for the next 10 years on Ether, like we do on Litecoin, if it's kind of hit its boundaries. Who knows? Ether anyway, yeah, so sorry, I digress. We had the double top again, analysis I've done many times previously. We had the double top here, took out the top, therefore this is not strong demand. So while we've got entries, possible entries here, these are not high probability entries, and I wanted to look at really at a minimum coming down to this 3-month demand, which wasn't quite tested on these previous two wicks, taking out those lows. You can look for a swing failure in here, closing a couple of CME gaps that are down there. But also a very real possibility that this is going to come as an annual demand down here. So if I move away from the BitMEX charts, maybe I can pick something that actually shows the annual demand. Well, I think maybe I can't because I think Binance wasn't around long enough either. I would have to use Bitfinex or something, which would be painful. So let's not do that. But yeah, so we've got an annual demand here at 730. So sadly, that is kind of what I would expect from this. I mean, you can argue, okay, Litecoin has held that similar structure, so maybe we'll hold through here. But maybe that's what Litecoin needs as well, that drop down into actual kind of proper demand from historically coming out of this range. Maybe this just does need to come back down and test here properly before having another proper bull run. Anyway, we cross that bridge and we come to it. But that is actually very fairly likely if I see a rejection. So this, normally black cross just means it's something that's a bit middle time frame that I'm less kind of confident of. So the red ones are typically the ones we're looking at, but the black in this instance is also because it's a swing failure. So I also use black for swing failure areas. So what we have here is this new 6-month supply. We've got the 61 fib there. It is on the log scale for linear for Ether, which is higher up at the CME gap, close up there. But what I do want you to look for is if we do get an up move coming over here to 2450 and coming up into, I guess, a 2500 is that 6-month level. If you get a swing failure there, then I think it's a 6-month supply. If it does stop hunt here into 6-month supply, then there is a fair chance we're going to get a significant drop. So I would say then get out of everything, forget what you're doing and wait for potentially this to fall significantly. Because that is really everything. What the range is telling me. It's what 6-month supply here. Come up and test into there. And then, yeah, I would look for, you know, if you're looking at this chart on any other time frame, okay, 6 months is going to take 5 years to play out for sure. But on any other time frame, I'd be going, okay, rejection here, 26, 25, 2600 area. You know, you'll stop up here at 5K if you were taking it on a very high time frame, and then looking for a move down into below 300 in here. So not ideal, and people will be very upset when I say that. Or the other alternative is if it doesn't come and test this 3 month first, maybe it can come up into test into the 6 month up here and then come down and hold this and still hold a higher low here. That is a possibility, and that would be like similar to what Litecoin's been doing. As Litecoin did come, these have come a lot deeper than where Ether is at the moment, I think. Yeah, so that's Ether high time frame. And again, you know, the bullish alternative is we have hit the start of this last up move. We did have a significant up move from here. It was, what was it? There was some news that propelled this. I can't remember what it was now. You know, we have hit the start. I think it was the Ether ETFs. Now, I feel like that caused a drop. I'm sure there's something else there anyway. But so we have come down to the start of that. You know, the bullish thesis is higher low, higher low, higher low. So again, nothing wrong with looking for longs here based on the fact we're on a higher low, but be conscious we have 2 months supply, 3 months supply right there, and 6 months at the top of that zone if we push up higher inside. So we continue to look at our low time frame entries, and then if we get really strong reactions off them, then we can look to hold those if necessary. But for now, we're still doing a lot of chopping around. So you can see I've got an alert here on this 75, there's 2 day and 5 day demand in there, and then I've got an alert back down at the bottom there. So low time frame for Ether, like I say, it's been a little bit more challenging because of A, my impatience, and B, yeah, well, basically A, my impatience is pretty much it. So yeah, these are the ones I talked about initially. We got long entry at the lows, and then came deeper in the zone, but held for what we wanted at the lows there. Then on the scalp side, yeah, daily supply, I think, and weekly supply, and just tapped up through them. I did then look at, I think here we had a trend line break, and then I looked at a re-entry on a bearish retest after a trend line break, but the wick went through, so it's just been a little bit painful here. I laid off for a little bit, but then again, looked like it was dropping, and at this point we're still at the lower high, so I don't regret this entry necessarily. I may regret the fact it was on a weekend, or it was at the end of a Friday that this one hit. But yeah, so that's not ideal, and perhaps I can't remember if this weekly had confirmed and we were testing in this weekly, in which case, like, if that had happened before this hit, then I should have deleted it, and I got that wrong. Then I managed to get a long entry on this, but again, I don't know what that was. Something, I think it was a 12-hour supply here. It just went through it, did a bit of a BART, and again, looking at the lower high, gave a reaction, but no, gave a reaction, but no. So these ones I really, yeah, probably should have waited until we hit this 2 month supply. Now this was a question mark purely because of what I said before. I just don't like much of the structure here. I preferred this on Ether actually to Bitcoin. Like, we did have a 12-hour supply here, so that has had a nice reaction off there. So again, we just need to see, but again, it's got the higher low. Like, we need to see this break demand if it's going to become bearish, or, you know, for now it's still bullish. So on Bitcoin and Ether today, both of them I put in alerts for 4-hour supply. Ether, for whatever reason, had a random pump and hit. So, and that's what was being asked in the Telegram channel. How would you take the trade from here if you shorted the 4-hour supply zone marked in red? That's this one. Now there is a 4-hour demand alerted lower. Would you book at least 50% profit at the demand zone, or would you go low time frame to see some bounce and demand form again? Or would you wait for sub 1800 as it's coming from 2 months supply? Yeah, I guess that's the burning question. The person who's asking me this, for him, I would say exit when it hits demand, because he's a scalper. Already, yeah, exit half, I think he suggested that, would book at least 50% profit at the demand. Yes, because he's a scalper, so I would say, in fact, probably here at this 3 day gets hit already. But yeah, I would say you're a scalper, so take at least half off here, because this obviously can still, so as I said, we've still got higher lows, so this could still keep going, you know, this could still that pretty badly, but this could still bounce in here, high, low, keep going, keep going. So from a scalp perspective, yeah. And as he says, it's got a new 4-hour demand here. So would I long this 4-hour demand? Again, I mean, that for me, it's up to you if you want to do that. For me, it's just too challenging now, and it's been too challenging even from here and here. Like if we'd come and tested here, I would have been more comfortable with it. When prices start going up or down and not testing zones, then I for my strategy, I do find it difficult because I want it to come back. And I'm always looking, so why hasn't it tested here? You know, okay, even if it tested the 4-hour above this daily at that 1640 level, I would be more comfortable with this. But it really hasn't had a significant pullback from this decent size up move that it's got. So now, and particularly because it's hit 2 months supply, I'm much more reluctant to look for aggressive longs up here. Does that mean it's ready to fall? I don't know. Does it mean it won't give you a scalp? If you, I mean, you could have longed today and got a decent scalp up to that 4-hour supply. You know, somebody else in the group is saying he thinks it's a long now. But for me, I just wouldn't trade long right next to 2 months supply. Well, what I would prefer to do, if you are going to continue to, or if you still think you're bullish on the market, then trade in alt or trade something else. But don't forget, you don't have to trade this. But from a scalp perspective, yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought for a minute then. From a scalp perspective, you can still trade this, of course, and we're still making higher lows. So yes, this is still a potential long entry to potentially take out the high. For me, we've also got 3 hits to the high. We've got a hit into 2 months supply, so I'm not going to long right next to a 2 month supply. For me, I'm short biased, but I would like to see a break of demand, a break of this uptrend. So take out that, take out that low, take out this low probably. Would like to see a decent reaction to look for a short entry based on the 2 month supply. That for me is the kind of the medium term trade. If I was trading with a lower time frame, it'd be a different situation. But based on for the question, yes, I would take off half here. Then if you're trading, if the aggressive entry is off the 2 month supply, then by all means try and hold it and see if we're going to get lower. The other thing with Bitcoin and Ether at the moment is they're just moving very slowly. So yes, maybe this is going to go lower, but there's also a very real chance that it goes here, it bounces around, maybe it goes up higher into supply, or maybe it doesn't, but it bounces around and then it does the drop some other time. We've got FOMC in half an hour, I think. So maybe it'll wait for that. But yeah, and this is always a challenge as well with taking profit when you're a scalper. Like, I mean, if you're really scalping, then you should just take profit regularly. And once you've got the entry, take profit. And as you say, like, I think whoever's asking us, take 50% off is a common strategy he uses. So that is the right thing to do, I believe. Let me just see where Bitcoin is. So Bitcoin has hit into that 4-hour now. Ether hasn't quite got there yet, but Bitcoin, because again, the other thing I would look at is the comparison. So the fact that Ether's gone up to there so quickly and Bitcoin's rejected off the previous point of control and these lows, but it didn't get up to its respective 4-hour. The pump on Bitcoin wasn't anywhere near as strong as the pump on Ether. There is a chance then that Ether will move, because if Bitcoin then does decide to do another wave up there, then Ether is going to go higher and potentially go through. So I would then also look at, as far as managing the trade goes, I would look at the comparison of what Bitcoin's doing as well, and whether it's likely that Bitcoin's going to take another run at the high. And in this case, it looks like it is possible that Bitcoin's going to take another run there. It's got the 4-hour up, then it's got the 4-day that I talked about just inside that 4-hour. And again, the higher lows. So it's not an easy market to trade at the moment. And we're up to 47 minutes and I still haven't managed to do any alts. What to do? Maybe I'll sign off this one quickly and just make this a BTC and ETH stream and then just come back in a few minutes. I just need to do something quickly and then come back in a few minutes and have a quick look at the majors again. Or should I just pause? No, maybe I'll just sign off and I'll come back in a little while. Or tomorrow morning even. That's rather annoying. I wanted to kind of finish this now. But yeah, I guess it's not going to work. Various things I need to do, take a shower and go out tonight as well. So, yeah, I think I'll just leave it there for now, and I will try and endeavour to. I'm leaving relatively early tomorrow, but I will endeavour to do an alt stream, or maybe just a video and upload a video, maybe later tonight even, or tomorrow before I go, just so we've got something on the alts. I hope it's a little bit helpful on Bitcoin anyway, or helpful to the extent of telling you that it's not an easy market and not to stress yourself out about it. And I guess what I was going to get to on the alts, just in conclusion, is that, yeah, the alts are just much better to trade. They're not as easy as they were previously, but they're not that bad. You've just got to maybe accept a slightly lower win rate at the moment. Or at least try and adapt your strategy so you're a little bit more comfortable with like the volatility and the possibility of like pump groups pumping things because the volume is so low. One thing I did want to actually look at that I haven't looked at, not cover quickly, was Ether BTC, as to whether ETH is going to go higher. So yeah, it's kind of similar here. So Ether came down and hit this old monthly level there. I wanted it lower, and the BTC pair didn't quite get to where I wanted it to get to. We have broken trend and we're pushing up, but it's also in 2 months supply. But as I said to you, so this is demonstrating kind of what I said on the Ether US dollar pair and BTC US dollar. That I don't like these chop here, because then it can push higher through the chop, and what we're seeing here is kind of trying to reject. They're not doing a very good job of it. Plus it has an untested zone up here, and I think even up the top, like if it really wants to do a decent bounce. So not ideal, because it hasn't hit proper zones down there, but Ether BTC can be slightly awkward. So my preference would be for Ether BTC to reject here and come back down there, but I'm not convinced that's what it's going to do. Just not necessarily very high probability. But yeah, so watch out for this continuing to push, because if this does continue to push, it made a 4-day demand and it just held a tap on that today. But if it does continue to push and wants to get up into there, then we'll see the US dollar pair is going to push higher into that 2-month supply as well. All right, anyway, that's 50 minutes, so I will just leave that, and then maybe I can try and do an alt stream a little bit later. I hope that was useful, and yeah, please let me know if you have any questions. Please feel free to join the Telegram channel and let me know if you have any questions, and let me know if you have any alt requests, and I will try and get to those if I come back later. And have a